So there's been a fascinating situation that's come to light the past week or so that has gotten Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez repudiation from both the left and the right, at least relative left and relative right within her party. She gave some campaign donations to other Democrats, some of whom oppose things like Medicare for All, which she's run on and ostensibly supports, which has angered some of her progressive supporters and socialist supporters, who some of whom have donated to her. Then, to compound that, several of the people she's made donations to have either returned or vowed to return the funds, publicly rejecting her help. It's seemingly for fear of appearing too left wing and wanting to distance themselves from her. So it's a really interesting story, and to help us sort through it, we're really fortunate to have Dr. Robert Boatwright, professor and chair of the Department of Political Science at Clark University in Massachusetts. He's an expert on campaign finance, American politics, among many other subjects. Dr. Boatwright, thanks for coming on. And in some ways, it seems to me this is a typical story, but some of the particulars make it really interesting and unconventional. So, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, Congresswoman Ocasio-Cortez, who has been very successful at raising funds for herself, decided to give some money to other Democrats who have less money and who are in vulnerable positions. That in and of itself is kind of a normal thing, is it not?
Yeah, in fact, the Democratic Party and I think the Republican Party as well, they basically set quotas for what representatives are supposed to give back to the party. So she's, in doing this, she's really just being a team player. Everybody's expected to give back money if they don't need it for their own campaign. And in her case, she has way more money than she's ever going to need to run for re-election. So mostly she's just being a good sport and giving up some of the money. You'll probably get to this later on. She's had a complicated history with the DCCC since her time in Congress. So in some ways, it's kind of a peace offering to the DCCC as well.
Mhm. So thank you for that. Yeah, and so this kind of starts getting into the ways which perhaps this was done in a not typical way. Yeah, and I'll let you give you the opportunity to talk about that. But you mentioned the DCCC. There, it's I believe now it's headed by Representative Maloney, who's also from New York, I believe.
Yeah.
And okay, thank you. And how, Representative Ocasio Cortez is um, these donations circumvented the DCCC, which is might be one of the in some ways circumvented, right? It seems, or at least there's news that like they contacted them, but the higher ups didn't approve it. What ways was her giving money now not typical in the way they did it? Perhaps how common or
Well,
uncommon was it for her to do it the way she did it?
I can't speak to the motives.
Sure.
You may have spoken to other people who know a little bit more about why she did it this way, but there are two ways as a member of Congress that you can hand out money from your campaign treasury. You can give as much as you want to the DCCC, write a big check for, $250 or whatever, or you can give money directly to other candidates. If you give money directly to other candidates, then obviously you have more control over where the money goes, but you are limited to you have to obey campaign finance regulations on that. So you're limited to $2,500 per election cycle. So it appears that what was controversial here is money that she directly gave to members of Congress. So in hindsight, had she wanted to avoid this, maybe she should have just given it all to the DCCC. And I can't speak to why she did it one way as opposed to the other.
Of course, of course. Yeah. Is it pretty uncommon for at least let's say, a relatively new junior member of Congress to try to give directly, especially to people who she's have all but repudiated her in the past? Someone like Connor Lamb. Is that common or uncommon in your
Well,
experiences?
it's pretty typical for members to give to other members.
Hmm.
It's unusual for a second-term member of Congress to have so much money at her disposal. So that part is unusual, but it's not really unusual for somebody to donate money to other members of Congress. Um, she gave money to people who were going to need it. So there are some people who are less fortunate than she is in terms of how safe their districts are. And I think she recognizes, as most Democrats do, that it's at best a 50-50 proposition that the Democrats will hold the House in 2022. So strategically for Ocasio-Cortez, she will need a Democratic majority in order to have any influence at all. So it's in her interest to help out people, even if they're not people who see eye to eye with her on many things.
That makes a lot of sense. If she had decided to just give it to the DTripleC and let them distribute as they saw fit, correct me if I'm wrong, Professor Boatwright, but it would never really have been an issue in terms of people like Connor Lamb or others who are now saying they're returning the money. It would have never been an issue in terms of people knowing that they had gotten money from her in some form or fashion, right?
No, I mean, she would have gotten credit from the party for contributing to the DCCC, but it would not have been possible to trace those donations to any particular member of Congress. There really would have been no controversy whatsoever.
Is it ever the case when members of Congress donate directly, maybe again not using the DCCC, to other members, maybe their friends, and like you said, then they make sure they observe or adhere to or try to adhere to all campaign donation laws? Is it ever typical, or has it ever happened where they go ahead and just communicate and say, hey, so and so, my colleague, my buddy, I'm going to send this over to you, because it seems unlikely to me from the complete outside position that had she contacted some of these members that they would have said, yes, send it to us. So it seems like they may have perhaps not even called them up to see if they wanted it. Is that typical to call, or is it not? Is it not typical to do that type of courtesy call?
No, but it's not generally controversial for members to give to other members. My guess is she had no idea that this would turn out the way it did. I think what she's getting caught up in is it's common for members to give to other members. In fact, since the passage of the Bipartisan Campaign Reform Act back in 2002, that is really how political parties have worked to direct money to members that need it. And it is not uncommon for politicians to refund contributions that are going to look embarrassing to them. If we go all the way back, a couple decades, go all the way back to the Enron scandal, for instance, back in around the time of the 2002 election, Enron had given money to virtually every member of Congress, and then when they wound up getting in legal trouble, every member scrambled to return that money so that they could claim the high road. That's happened since then with members who have been ensnared in various sorts of scandals, with individual donors who get in various kinds of legal trouble. And I think that what she's getting caught up in is over the last year or so, I think the amount of this sort of performance about people refusing campaign contributions or refusing to give to people has really gotten to be a bigger deal. For instance, around January 6th, right after the insurrection of the Capitol, a number of corporations very publicly said, well, we're not going to give money to Josh Hawley or to other members of Congress that we saw as supporting this. And of course, we're seeing this business in Atlanta where a variety of corporations are being sort of pushed not to give money to Georgia politicians. So the amount of performance around campaign contributions has really grown a lot in the last few months. And I think the amount of this sort of like gotcha journalism where people kind of comb through the contribution records of politicians looking for something that can be used in the campaign ad has also grown lately. So I think had she given this money in her first term, I don't know that this would have been as big a deal. I think for most members it wouldn't be that big a deal. I think in terms of how it actually will look for somebody like Connor Lamb to have a Republican attack ad that says he took money from Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. I can't imagine that's going to affect many votes. So I think it's all just a little bit of performance that maybe it wouldn't happen at another time.
That's interesting, and I actually want to. I'll return to that note in a moment and probably end there, Doctor. But I wanted to see also if you had a take on, I guess, the internal politics here. So, if I guess I want a sense of if someone, if a representative, a member of Congress, a member of the House of Representatives, like Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, um, not using the DCCC to donate funds to the cause of colleagues in the party's campaigns. Is how is that likely to be viewed by the DCCC? Is that likely to annoy leadership there? Is that likely to be viewed? I know you can't speak to any her motivations or anything like that, but is that likely to be viewed within the power structure as someone inappropriately striking out on their own and trying to create their own little fiefdom? Does it look bad? Does it make the DCCC kind of look bad to other members when people go around it?
No, it's the way that contributions to and from the DCCC work are that the DCCC is limited in what they can give directly to members. They can spend an unlimited amount of money on behalf of members, right? Running ads on their behalf or doing other things that they do without directly communicating with those members. But campaign finance law treats party committees, like they are independent groups, and that's kind of a dumb feature of campaign finance law, but that's the way it is. So the DCCC has the resource. If you take like Connor Lamb, Connor Lamb in some ways is a bad example, but take some first or second term member of Congress in a competitive district. The DCCC has a cap on what they can give to that member, and they're going to hit that cap. What they do beyond that, they can either spend independently using whatever funds they want, or they can encourage members to give directly to those candidates. If I'm a candidate running for office or running for re-election, it is more useful to me to have that money than to have the DCCC spending it on my behalf, because I have better intelligence about where money needs to be spent, what needs to be going on than the DCCC does, and I can't call them and tell them that. So it's more efficient for if she's giving money to people who need it, which I think she is, it's more efficient for her to give that money to them directly than it is to give it to the DCCC.
I see.
So if you go through the contribution records of most members in competitive races, they're going to have maximum contributions from, say, like all of the Democratic committee chairs, the Democratic leadership, anybody who's got money that they don't need. So she's kind of just fitting into that category, and if it weren't for the controversy that occasionally swirls around her, it would not be an issue.
I see. And to close, Dr. Boatwright, I wanted to return to something you mentioned a few minutes ago and give you the opportunity to expand on it if you want it. Is there evidence that you're aware of that this type of this smear in particular, not just of like someone being liberal, but this like supposed smear of socialist, this tag, that it can hurt candidates in campaigns? Is there anything more to it than this kind of like general fog of fear based on just anecdotal stuff? Is this something that you think candidates that are returning funds, Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, that they in actuality have empirical evidence to fear of losing because of it, or have you not seen much evidence to support that fear?
It's hard to prove this stuff empirically. If you want to ask, does it make any difference if such and such member of Congress gets associated with AOC as opposed to somebody else, or if she, the ad says she gave them money as opposed to, he voted with their X% of the time. It's hard to make those gradations. I think it is pretty indisputable that in the last election cycle, Republican attack ads tried very hard to associate every single vulnerable Democrat with Ocasio-Cortez or other members of the so-called squad or Nancy Pelosi. People can draw their own conclusions about whether that is sexist or racist or whatever. But I think Republicans believed it was effective to try to tie every Democrat to these candidates. I don't think at the end of the day it makes any difference whether she gave them money, right? I mean, if I'm a Republican ad consultant, I'm still going to find some way to mention AOC in my attack ads, right? Regardless of whether what the connection is. So in some ways, I think these members are being overly risk averse. I think it is possible that there's some sort of bad blood between some of them and her, but I ultimately think it's it sounds like a kind of a regrettable controversy on everybody's part. My understanding from talking to people that know more than I do about what goes on at Justice Democrats is that AOC and some of the other Justice Democrats type candidates are trying to be less confrontational towards the Democratic Party and towards the DCCC during this Congress than they were last time. So it sounds like this was part of that effort to try to play well with them, and it's kind of unfortunate that it turned out the way it did for him.
It's really fascinating. Thanks so much for the insight. Again, we've been speaking with Robert Boatwright, professor of political science at Clark University. Dr. Boatwright, really appreciate your time. Thank you so much.